This isn't just another travel horror story. This is about why you should never ever stay in certain Airbnbs in Japan when the sun goes down. It started with Aiko, a 24-year-old university student from Kyoto who needed a cheap place to stay in Tokyo for a job interview. Like millions of travelers around the world, she turned to Airbnb, scrolling through dozens of listings until she found what seemed like the perfect solution. A small apartment in Shinjuku, reasonably priced, with decent photos and positive reviews from previous guests. The host, listed simply as Takeshi, had a 5-star rating and seemed responsive to messages. What Aiko didn't know was that she was about to become part of something much darker than a simple accommodation booking. Something that would make her question everything she thought she understood about the people we trust with our most vulnerable moments. The apartment building stood on a narrow street typical of Tokyo's dense urban landscape, 6 stories of weathered concrete and small windows squeezed between a convenience store and a ramen shop that closed at midnight. During the day, the area buzzed with salary workers and tourists, but after dark, these side streets became different places entirely, the kind of quiet that feels too heavy, too deliberate. Aiko arrived on a Thursday evening in late October when Tokyo's autumn air carried that sharp bite that makes you pull your jacket tighter. The building's entrance was unremarkable, just a glass door with a simple intercom system and rows of tiny mailboxes with names she couldn't quite read in the dim lighting. The elevator was one of those old-fashioned ones that shuddered between floors, taking forever to reach the 4th level where her temporary home waited. Apartment 4B looked exactly like the photos, a compact studio with tatami mats, a small kitchen area, and a narrow bathroom that required careful maneuvering. The sliding closet door ran along one entire wall, and a single window looked out onto the alley below. Everything appeared clean and well-maintained. The bedding was fresh, towels were folded neatly on the small table, and a welcome note in Japanese and broken English sat next to a bottle of water. Aiko set down her overnight bag and took photos to send to her friends back in Kyoto. The place looked perfect for her needs. She had a job interview the next morning at a marketing firm in Shibuya, and this location put her within easy reach of the train lines she needed. Everything seemed to be falling into place exactly as planned. But Tokyo has a way of revealing its secrets slowly, and some apartments hold memories that refuse to stay buried. The first sign that something wasn't quite right came around 11 that evening. Aiko was reviewing her interview notes when she heard a soft knocking sound. 3 gentle taps, then silence. She looked up from her papers, listening carefully. The sound had seemed to come from the front door, but it was so quiet she couldn't be certain. She waited, pen hovering over her notebook. The building was old, and old buildings make noises. Pipes settling, neighbors moving around, the normal sounds of urban living compressed into thin walls and shared spaces. After a few minutes of silence, she returned to her preparations. Then it happened again. 3 soft knocks, deliberate and measured. This time there was no mistaking the source or the intentional nature of the sound. Someone was at her door. Aiko approached the entrance cautiously. The apartment had no peephole, just a solid wooden door with 2 locks that she had secured upon arrival. She pressed her ear against the wood, listening for any sound in the hallway beyond. Footsteps, breathing, the rustle of clothing, anything that might indicate who was standing on the other side. Nothing. She waited for several minutes before quietly turning the locks and cracking the door open just enough to peer through the gap. The hallway was empty, dimly lit by a single fluorescent bulb that cast harsh shadows along the walls. The elevator doors were closed, and she could hear no movement anywhere in the building. Aiko closed the door and relocked it, telling herself that she had probably imagined the whole thing. Stress from the upcoming interview, unfamiliar surroundings, the natural anxiety that comes with staying in a strange place. These were reasonable explanations for what had probably been nothing more than the building settling or sounds from neighboring apartments. But deep down, she knew what she had heard, and as she tried to return to her interview preparation, a small voice in the back of her mind wondered who had been standing outside her door, and why they had walked away so silently when she hadn't answered. The rest of that first night passed without incident, though Aiko found herself listening for sounds in the hallway every time she heard the building creak or shift. Sleep came eventually, but it was the light, restless kind that leaves you feeling more tired than when you went to bed. The interview went well. Aiko walked out of the Shibuya office building with a genuine smile, something she hadn't felt in weeks. The marketing firm seemed impressed with her portfolio, and the hiring manager had mentioned they would be in touch within a few days. As she navigated the crowded streets back toward Shinjuku, she felt that rare combination of relief and optimism that comes after a successful presentation. Tokyo looked different in the afternoon light. The same narrow alleys that had felt oppressive the night before now seemed charming, filled with the energy of people going about their daily lives. Office workers grabbed quick lunches from convenience stores, tourists studied maps and pointed at landmarks, and the general hum of urban activity made everything feel normal and safe. She stopped at a small cafe near the train station and treated herself to an expensive coffee, something she normally wouldn't do on her tight budget. But today felt like a celebration. The job would mean moving to Tokyo, starting a new chapter, maybe finally having the financial stability she'd been working towards since graduation. By the time she returned to the apartment building, the sun was already starting its descent toward the horizon. Tokyo's autumn days were short, and darkness came earlier than she expected. The same convenience store was still busy with customers, but the ramen shop had started preparing for its evening rush. Everything looked perfectly ordinary. She climbed the stairs this time instead of taking the elevator, partly for exercise and partly because something about that shuddering metal box felt less appealing in the growing dusk. The hallway on the fourth floor was quiet, just as it had been the night before. Apartment 4B waited behind its unremarkable door, exactly as she had left it that morning. Inside, Aiko kicked off her interview shoes and changed into comfortable clothes. She felt genuinely good about how the day had gone, and the strange noises from the previous evening seemed like nothing more than first-night jitters in an unfamiliar place. She made herself a simple dinner using the small kitchen facilities and settled in to read a book she'd brought from Kyoto. The sun disappeared completely around 6:30, leaving the apartment lit by the overhead fluorescent fixture and a small lamp near the window. Outside, the alley was illuminated by scattered streetlights and the glow from neighboring buildings. Tokyo never truly went dark, but this particular street fell into those pockets of shadow that exist between the major thoroughfares. Around 9 o'clock, as Aiko was brushing her teeth, she heard it again. The same 3 soft knocks, measured and deliberate. This time she was certain someone was definitely at her door and they were being intentionally quiet about it. She rinsed her mouth and walked to the entrance, her bare feet silent on the tatami mats. The knocking had stopped, but she could sense something different about the silence. It felt occupied, as if someone was standing just on the other side of the door, waiting. Aiko pressed her ear against the wood, holding her breath to listen more carefully. What she heard made her stomach tighten with something that wasn't quite fear yet, but wasn't comfort either. Breathing, slow, steady breathing from the hallway. Someone was definitely there, standing close enough to the door that she could hear them inhaling and exhaling. They weren't moving, weren't speaking, weren't doing anything except existing in that space right outside her temporary home. She waited, frozen against the door, listening to this evidence of another person's presence. Minutes passed. The breathing continued, never changing rhythm, never indicating any intention beyond simply being there. It was the kind of patience that felt unnatural, deliberate in a way that made her skin crawl. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she heard soft footsteps moving away down the hallway. Not hurried, not secretive, just the casual steps of someone who had finished whatever they came to do. The elevator opened and closed, and then the building returned to its normal nighttime quiet. The second night brought scratching sounds from inside the walls, soft at first, like mice or settling wood, but too rhythmic, too purposeful. Aiko lay in the darkness, listening to something moving through the spaces between rooms, following patterns that seemed almost like communication. When she woke the next morning, her clothes were scattered across the floor. Items she had carefully folded and placed in her bag were now strewn about the room, as if someone had been searching through them. The sliding closet door, which she distinctly remembered closing, stood halfway open. By the third night, Aiko had convinced herself there were logical explanations for everything: old buildings, thin walls, maybe a maintenance worker with access to the apartments. She even laughed at herself for being so paranoid. The laughter stopped when the lights began to flicker, not the gentle dimming of electrical problems, but sharp stroboscopic flashes that turned the small room into a nightmare of dancing shadows. In those split seconds of illumination, she could see the closet door sliding open by itself. Inch by deliberate inch, footsteps echoed from somewhere inside the walls. Aiko grabbed her phone and messaged Takeshi, the host, her fingers trembling as she typed. His response came within minutes, and what she read made her blood freeze. "You shouldn't be afraid. This is my place." She heard keys jingling in the hallway. The soft click of locks being turned. Aiko didn't wait to see who entered. She grabbed her bag and ran, fleeing into Tokyo's neon-lit streets where crowds of people provided the safety that four walls could not. Behind her in the doorway of the building, a figure stood watching. When she looked back, expecting to see someone chasing her, she found only a smile disappearing into the crowd. The next day, she searched for the Airbnb listing on her phone. It had vanished completely, as if it had never existed at all. Some places in Tokyo are meant to remain empty after dark. Some hosts never really leave their properties, and some accommodations are listed for reasons that have nothing to do with hospitality. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, because sometimes the danger isn't what you might encounter in an unfamiliar place. Sometimes the danger is the place itself, and the person who holds the keys to your temporary sanctuary.